Welcome to the Apartment Operators Podcast, where you can learn from experienced operators what it really means to be an apartment operator. No fluff, no sugarcoating, just the raw, unfiltered truth of the ups and downs of operating multifamily communities.
Welcome, everybody, to the Apartment Operators Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Guzman, and today I have a personal mentor of mine, Andrew Cushman. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Joseph. Glad to be here, man.
Awesome. So for the audience that haven't heard about the great Andrew Cushman, can you give a few minutes just to run down a little bit about yourself, your background, and your portfolio, kind of so everybody know what you're doing these days?
Yeah, I took the standard route into real estate and got a chemical engineering degree. And then, after about 7.5 years of that, I discovered flipping houses. And whenever I say we, it's my wife and I. We flipped our first property here in Southern California. I think it was early 2007. And made about as much as I did all year at my job. So I said, all right, that's it. I'm out of here. Went in and quit. We did the flipping thing full time for about 4 years. And then we said, this has been great, but now we're kind of at the bottom of this recession. No one has equity anymore. Deals are getting hard to find. There's a ton of competition. What's the next big thing? And we kind of looked around. We said, well, we think it's going to be apartments because now, eventually we're going to come out of this recession, which means household formation, job formation. No one can buy a house for the next 7 years because they all got foreclosed on. And we still have immigration. We still have population growth. So, we think apartments are going to do really well. So we went and found a mentor, just word of mouth. We asked our single family mentor, hey, do you know someone who does apartments? And he's like, yeah, I do. And so we connected with him, and he taught us the business. And our first deal was a mostly vacant 92-unit property on the other side of the country out in Georgia. And that was 2011. Since then, we've done a little over 1,800 units and have been full-time apartment investors, I guess, 7 years now, something like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And 92 mostly vacant units for your first deal. That sounds like swinging for the fences.
I wouldn't recommend anyone do it that way. Now, I should clarify. 92 units as a first deal, that's fine. Mostly vacant, no. So,
well, share a little bit more. Why not?
When you're doing your first deal, there's enough challenges to begin with without adding on unnecessary ones. So, properties, especially in this economy, if a property is 75% vacant, odds are there's some serious things wrong. And if part of what's wrong is the neighborhood, that's something you can't fix. So that's one thing to be aware of. But if you don't have a lot of experience in the business and you've got a property that's 50 years old and mostly vacant, the odds of you making mistakes on estimating the renovation is going to be much higher. The odds of you not knowing the specialties of managing that type of property and making mistakes are going to be a lot higher. You're going to have more problems with vandalism, with crime. You're going to have trouble getting a loan on the property. There's just so many things that done right can make a lot of money, but on your first deal can also increase the chances that it doesn't work out so well for you.
So what's your biggest takeaway from that first deal, with all the challenges that went through?
Well, for one thing, I'm glad I did it because it did end up profitable. We sold it for several times more than what we bought it for. We dramatically underestimated the rehab, so I learned a lot about how to do that, especially on older buildings. But the biggest takeaway is even though that deal was very challenging, probably the most stressful 6 months out of my life, we're still super glad that we did it, because without doing that deal, we wouldn't be here today. If we had given up or letting it fall through, who knows where we would be. But the second deal is far easier than the first one. So that deal, as difficult as it was, it still ended well for us and the investors, and it's the one that got us started in the business. And every deal after that has been easier because we've never bought anything like that again.
So, okay, that's a good segue. So, what do you buy these days? What is your preferred profile of a deal these days?
Unfortunately, what we've been buying for the last 5 years has now become very popular, and that's the C plus to B property class value add properties, generally built 1980 to maybe 2000 or so. And my value add, that could be generally that falls into two categories. That's management, meaning it's a property that isn't being well managed and we can improve on that, and or it hasn't been upgraded, or there's deferred maintenance, or there's amenities or something that we can do to the physical asset to improve it and get higher rents.
Okay, and like I said, this market, it makes that very competitive. So, um, how do you go about finding your next deal?
The biggest thing for us is broker relationships. And part of that is because we're looking at stuff that's generally 100 units and up. Meaning, and most owners of 100 units and up, number one, they tend to be a little more sophisticated, so they're not very likely to sell you their property off of a yellow letter. And then, the brokers spend their lives building relationships with all of these owners. They know, especially if it's a long-term broker, they know every owner of every property in their region. And we found it most effective to leverage those relationships. Now, that's not necessarily just waiting for the email blast for the next listing. And we do look at those as well, but it's also, having a good relationship, so that, and having the broker know what is a good fit for you as a buyer, so that when they talk to a seller, they can be like, oh, this property is a great fit for Joseph, or this property is a great fit for Andrew. Let me just call them and see if we can put a deal together now, right? Because if the seller, many cases, if the seller can just get their price, they're happy, and they don't necessarily care about going through the whole marketing process. So the number one is broker relationships, and then we are in the process of setting up a system to be even a little bit more proactive, as opposed to just talking to our favorite brokers and catching up and say, oh yeah, hey, I talked to the seller, might be a good fit. We're actually going to go out and make a list of properties that we like, and then to give that to the brokers and say, hey, of the people of these properties, who do you already have a good relationship with? Is there any way maybe we could just put a deal together? And kind of jump, instead of waiting for the seller to come to the broker and say, yeah, okay, I'm ready to sell, we're going to identify properties we know we already want, and then go to the broker and go to the seller and say, hey, let's see if we can put something together.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We've done the same thing last year when we pointed out a property across the street from a property we already owned and told the broker, go get us that one. So that was very good strategy that we were able to capitalize on. So let's talk about your current portfolio or your past portfolio. Can you give us a little bit of our listeners like to hear some funny stories, some horror stories. Give us a couple of nuggets of the things that someday when we'll write a book about apartments, we'll put those in.
You want just horror stories, or something that or something that we can learn from, or what? I've got plenty of all of those.
I'm sure you do, like most operators out there. Just give us a couple that come up to mind.
Well, I think one of the most, I talked about not buying properties in rough neighborhoods or neighborhoods that you can improve. And one of the things, anyone who's watching the video can see this, but what I'm holding in my hand is a bullet that I pulled out of the wall of one of our properties when I was there on a visit. And I keep that as a reminder that I never ever buy in the hood. Number one, those properties don't ever pencil out in real world like they do on the spreadsheet. And two, even if they did, they're just generally not worth the headache. Now there is a small subset of apartment investors that specialize in that type of stuff. And if you're that person and you have the fortitude for dealing with that kind of crap and that kind of tenant base and the stuff that goes along with that, and and you do specialize it and you get really good at it, you can make money at it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but in general, it's just not worth it, and it never works out as good as you think it will. So that's that. I have that sitting on my computer at all times. And that actually that very same property. This is one of my favorite stories. Is that property? It was a big property. It was over 300 units, so it had a nice big standalone leasing office, and it had skylights and all this stuff. And one day, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, broad daylight, someone who was pissed off because they weren't paying their rent, and we told them they had to leave. Climbed up on the roof of the building and threw Molotov cocktails through the skylights, and attempted to burn down the leasing office. They didn't burn it down, but they did burn it. So that was that was a fun one, and there's plenty of stuff like that from those type of properties. So. Although I should say we only bought a couple like that, and that was in the beginning, and those are long sold off, and nowadays we're in the B class properties where you might, probably the worst thing we see now is someone left their iPad on the front seat of their car, and naturally someone grabbed it or something like that. So.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we have our own stories that come with the properties, and you're right. The rougher the property, the more extreme the stories are. So let's talk a little bit about your operation, right? So I know you're the operator. You had 1,800 units recently before you sold a couple, and that's a big operation. So how does a one or two man show kind of control that much span of units?
We've got probably the biggest key is we have a very good third-party property management company, and we lean on their resources a lot, and they've kind of grown along with us. When we first hired them, they managed 3,000 units. Now they manage 25,000 units, and they've actually maintained discipline as they've grown. I've seen some management companies be awesome at 3,000, and then when they got to 20,000, they were horrible. But they haven't, and so we lean very heavily on them, and that's one of the reasons we try to buy properties that are 100 units and above, so that that property can support its own full-time staff and management, and we're not involved in the day-to-day process of, okay, does this guy get $5 off his lease, or and all that, just day-to-day admin stuff. And that's part of being a true operator, and really when I mean operator, it's almost asset manager, where we're not handling the day-to-day operations of, we got a lease today, or this unit has to be ready tomorrow. We're providing the leadership, the vision, the direction, the funding, all of that kind of stuff for the properties. And so how we manage that many units is, of course, we've got the on-site staff, but then there's regionals, and then I'm still in touch with the owners of the property management company, and there's also a renovation coordinator, and keeping all those people on the same page. We do weekly conference calls, and we include the maintenance supervisor at each property. Everyone always tends to forget that guy or gal, and they're very, in fact, think about it, they probably have more interaction with the residents than almost anybody else on the team once those residents move in. So we always bring them, and they have a huge impact on your expenses. So we always want to make sure the maintenance guys are part of the, don't get left out. We do weekly calls, and then of course, I actually personally do go out and tour the properties generally once a quarter. If it's something we've owned for 5 years and it's just cruising along, I might not visit as frequently, but then something that we just purchased that's in the middle of a renovation or repositioning, I might actually visit more frequently. So that's generally, how we manage that. It's real. And then we actually did just bring on, I have an office manager that's been with us for 5 or 6 years. She does an amazing job with a large variety of things. And then we just just a month ago brought 2 additional people on to help with both asset management and to help increase our deal pipeline and looking at new acquisitions. So.
So just to touch back a little bit, you said you have weekly calls. Who's on that call? Do you do that one call for all the properties? Do you do a call per property per week? How does that
Yeah,
look like?
it's just every Tuesday is just a marathon of conference calls back to back to back to back, and it's myself, it's the all of the property staff, so that'd be the property manager, the leasing assistant, the maintenance supervisor, the maintenance tech, literally everybody on site, and then the regional manager for that property as well. And then if it's a property that's under renovation, the rehab coordinator is on that call as well. And so what we do is our agenda is we run through anything renovation or maintenance related, and then we let the renovation guy go, and then we go over the weekly report, and how many leases did we get, how would we collect, what was traffic, turnover, all those kind of things, and then any other issues that come up towards the end. And so yeah, those are for most properties, those are every week. And again, for the properties that are just, we've had them for 4, 5, 6 years, they're cruising along, they're way ahead of pro forma, and there's just not that much to talk about. Some of those properties are either every other week or once a month.
Understood. And why did you decide to do that weekly meeting with everybody on site? Most of the operators I get to talk to are doing that with the regional, maybe someone from the corporate office of the property management, but they never get to the leasing agent and the maintenance tech level. What led you to that format, and what do you see value coming out of those?
Because if you want to get the absolute truth of what's really happening, talk to the people who are actually on site every day. A regional manager, part of their job is to polish things up and present a nice picture to the owner. And the way to get around that is to have everybody on a call at the same time. And as long as you're halfway decent at asking questions, you will find out what is really going on and what the real issues are. And you can be a much better operator. Second of all, and I cannot tell you how many times I've had property level staff come to us and say, you guys are the best owners we've ever worked with. You actually listen to us. You actually give us feedback. You actually help us get things done. And they're like, most owners we never see, we never talk to. It's all through the management company. And we let them know that the management company exists for a reason, and they are supposed to follow the chain of command. But that my job is to empower and enable them to be able to do the best they can at their jobs. And that's why we're there. So, and there's so many times where I have found things out because the maintenance guy is on the call and I asked a question, or they just happen to blurt something out. Because that's another thing, a regional manager or anybody cannot coach for 2, 3, 4, 5 on-site staff of all what they can say and not say. It's gonna come out, right? Especially the maintenance guy. He doesn't, whatever. He's not gonna be.
There's no politic there.
Yeah, exactly. The politics falls apart when you have every level right there at the same time, and it gets very hard for somebody to spin the picture and present something a little different than what it is. So that's why we have that. And like I said, I've got a list of managers who, like, we sold the property or something, and they're like, I've got one from Texas who's like, I'll move to Georgia to come work with you guys again. It also builds loyalty and trust, because they know, there's been times where no management company is perfect and no individual is perfect. So there's been times where, for whatever reason, a manager felt like a regional or someone else on the team, it just wasn't happening the way it should, or just an issue wasn't getting dealt with, and they reach out to me, and I'm able to solve that from a different angle or at a different level, and really keep them moving forward. So that's actually, and you're right, most people don't do that, and I think it's a missed opportunity, and it builds a lot of trust in a stronger team. And I will be clear though, that's not me getting involved with, okay, how do we handle this work order? That's not it. It's team building, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure everyone feels included, and again, it builds performance and loyalty and gives you a better idea of what's really happening.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's great for employee retention, right? So people feel they get heard. It's great. So we talk to a lot of operators, and we always have nuggets dropped in every podcast. And this, I just want to reiterate what you said over here. This is probably the biggest gold nugget we've heard so far in the podcast, and that is, if you want to know what actually happens on site, you got to talk to the people on site. And that's just phenomenal. Thank you for that. So you mentioned you're working with third-party property management. How did you go about finding them? How did you interview? What were you looking for when you were hiring a property management company?
I found the best way to find a property management company is when you're talking with brokers, and you can substitute the word, lender for broker, and lender, broker, whatever. So when you're talking with lenders and brokers, and let's say you're looking at a property, maybe you're in Dallas and you're looking at a property and you're new to the market and you need to find a management company. What I did is I asked brokers and lenders, hey, if you were going to buy this property, who are the top 2 or 3 management companies you would hire to run it for you? And I did that over and over again, and I built a list of who kept coming. And what happened is like the same 2 or 3 companies came up over and over and over again. I'm like, these are the 3 that I need to talk to. And so then I went to those top 3, and I built a list of like 30 questions, and I went through and I interviewed them all. And then one really stood out above the others. And then I flew out to Atlanta and physically met with the owner of the company. We went and had dinner, and we interviewed each other for an hour and a half to make sure it was a good fit. And then we hired them, and in fact, not only have we kept them on those properties, but in another state, we had a different management company, which we eventually fired, and then brought the Georgia management company out to handle those properties for us. So that actually ended up being a very effective way of finding a good management company.
That's great. So what are the top 2-3 qualities you're looking for in a property management company? What made that one stand out above all others?
There's a couple. One is you want a management company that specializes in the same type of asset that you specialize in. If in a company that primarily manages A-class properties is not going to run your C-class deal the way it should be run. They're not gonna be good at the special tactics that need to be employed to actually get the rent paid on a C-class property. They're probably going to run it too expensive. They're going to do things that just don't really apply to a C-class property, and vice versa. A company that specializes in C-class properties is not going to be really good at running an A. So they specialized in the C and the B space, and so we knew that's where we were, and we liked that. The other thing was, the 2 founders of the company had come from a fairly extensive previous background in property management and were very well known in the Southeast. Every single person that I came across that knew them spoke very highly of them. They were also small enough where I can reach out to the owners at any time. I have their cell phone numbers and they answer. But they were also big enough to have the resources and the depth needed to handle issues when they come up, right? So let's say my manager gets in a car wreck and all of a sudden they're gone, right? Well, our management company will just bring in another manager to fill the hole for a while, rather than our property sitting there with no manager, because they have floating managers that are for that purpose of when there's an emergency opening at a property, they can just fill it right away now, and while we find a new permanent one. They also, charged us what they charged us a very fair rate for managing the properties. Now at this point, it's we're at a decent enough scale that helps. But even in the beginning, they were. I think now we pay 3%. I think the first one we paid 3.5 or 4. And then once we kept adding properties, now it's just three across the board. And I could go on and on. I mean, and now I look at it and I say, they have leverage that as a operator with just even 1,000 or 2,000, for us, you and I, it's like, oh, 2,000 units. Yeah, we feel pretty good about ourselves. But in the world of multifamily, that's still really not much. And so they can get leverage that I can't get because they have suppliers who, when they go to those suppliers and like, all right, hey, we manage 25,000 units now, they can get incredible pricing, which they just pass on to us as the owner. And so there's advantages there as well.
That's great. Thank you for that. So with all that, you reached a scale of almost 2,000 units. Did the thought of self-managing ever cross your mind? What are your thoughts about self-management?
Generally speaking, I think it's a bad idea, and there's a handful of reasons for that. Now I will say, if you're buying a fourplex and it's down the street from where you live, fine. I still would. We've got a single family rental a mile away. I don't manage that myself, but I generally think self-management is a bad idea. Number one, there's just not a lot of money in it. For one, it's not a profit center. It can be a bit of a balancer in different markets, right? If you've got management income coming in, so I do understand that aspect as that appeal as a business owner, but generally speaking, there's not a lot of money in it. Another reason is, who are you? Are you a property? Are you a jack of all trades? Or are you an apartment owner and operator? So are you focusing on acquiring more properties and rapidly scaling that up to 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 units? Or are you also going to be trying to do property management and all these other things? And then also what I just alluded to before is leverage, right? For us, if you come, like, for example, I came from flipping houses, right? And then first deal, 92 units, like, oh, wow, I got 92 units. That's some leverage. No, it's not really. For us, it feels big, but granted, especially in this economy, no one cares if you've got 90 units. So you can, again, just like leveraging broker relationships to get deals, you can leverage the property management company to get better pricing and better service and then higher level contacts and all of that. And one of the things I often hear is, oh, well, no one cares about my property like I do. So this is what I would say. All right, Joseph, you're married, right? You still like your wife?
Very much.
All right, good. So let's say, heaven forbid, she gets a headache, goes into the hospital, and they're like, you've got a brain tumor. It's benign, but we have to get it out, right? So, you schedule the surgery. The day the surgery comes, she's on the table. They're getting ready to put her under and remove the tumor. And Joseph, you walk in, you put your hand on the shoulder of the surgeon, like, hey, buddy, you know what? I appreciate what you're doing here, but I care about her more than you, so I'm going to take care of this, right? Caring doesn't equal competence.
That's so true.
It does. I can't I can't tell you how many properties I've bought from guys who own 1,000 or 2,000 units and manage it themselves, and there's so much management upside on that property because they candidly don't really know what they're doing. It is easy to do property management at a mediocre level, and that's what most people do. It's very hard to do it at an exceptional level. And there are operators out there that own 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 units that do it. I could name a handful that do a fantastic job, and they're very vertically integrated. And for them, it does make sense and it does work. I would say for the average investor, especially someone who's just getting started at 50, 100, 200, 300, 400 units, your best bet is to hire the right property management company and closely work with them so that you can focus on scaling your acquisitions in your business and then learn the property management from them. And if at some point down the road, you want to start your own property management company and all that, that's fine. And I know that's always the ongoing argument. some guys absolutely love it. A lot of guys don't. It's pretty obvious to tell where I land. But again, I know some guys with 5 and 7 and 10,000 units, and they wouldn't even think of touching property management, because like, why would I do that? I want to go buy a $30 million property. I'm not going to waste my time, making 3 or 4 or 5%, trying to manage it. And then the final thing is too, when as a syndicator, when you send out your offering memorandum and you're self-managing and you're taking, usually if it's self-management, a 4 or 5% management fee, some of this more astute investors will look at that and say, well, wait a second. So you're going to get 4 or 5% no matter what happens with this property, no matter whether I'm getting paid or not, and you could just hire another company and pay 3%. That comes up too. So that's just another factor.
Yeah. So I like to just put it down very simple as a headaches to returns ratio.
Yes.
And that is just, I don't know how these guys do that for fee management. I do have a little bit of a different approach, and we've had that conversation in the past of when we get to the size of 1,200, 1,500 units, then we'll reevaluate if it's the time to take over or not. But it's definitely not a financial decision. You're not going to make money out of it compared to the brain damage it generates. But it's more of a brand control and quality control. And what I learned is if you work with the right property management company, you can still get that brand control and that quality control without having to take everything in-house and bring the headache.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and we should clarify, what I'm talking about is not set it and forget it, right? Going back to our previous conversation about the weekly calls and the visits, we're working very closely with that property management company. We are not hiring them and then saying, all right, cool, send us the monthly report. That won't work so well, no matter who's managing your company. You have to be a good asset manager, and then third party can work really well if you hired the right one to start with.
Yeah, I was talking about gold nuggets. This is just another one right here dropped by Andrew.
Wait, I'm dropping money? Wait a second.
Property managing companies are, no matter how good they are, you can't just hand over the keys and forget about it. It's not going to work because good companies go bad. Good managers goes bad. Just the wrong person at the wrong place could generate a lot of damage on your property. So you can't just set it and forget it, like Andrew said. This is just was worth repeating again and again. So I want to segue a little bit over to your residents, right? The people that live in your properties. Do you do anything to encourage retention or leasing or any great ideas that you guys do, let's say events or specials or anything like that, that helps you attract and retain your residents?
One of the things that I try to impress on our managers is there should never be a day out of the year when the office isn't decorated for some holiday, right? And that could be the typical ones, 4th of July, Easter, Christmas, whatever. But any excuse, it can be, St. Patrick's Day, National Pie Day, National Chocolate Day, whatever. We should be celebrating and decorated something at all times. Just for the festive attitude and the fun, and having an excuse to give people treats and all that. But we also run open houses. We've done stuff where local charities or groups will bring food to residents, or we'll do the same thing, partner with local businesses. We've opened up property and actually had a small carnival on it one time, and that was actually exceedingly popular. We got a ton of leases out of that. Didn't cost us anything.
Wait, don't just jump all over it, right? What do you mean a little carnival, and how did it not cost you anything?
Well, there was it was a community thing, and one of the big, this was in Texas, so it was a large local church. A lot of our residents went to that church, and they partnered up and said, hey, we're going to do like a Saturday carnival. And, and we said, well, we agreed that they could do it at our property. And so they set up fun, games and food and like bounce houses and all that kind of stuff. And they did it at our property. And of course, all of our residents got to enjoy it, but it also brought in a ton of other people. And that's probably, I don't remember the exact numbers. That's probably one of the most successful leasing days I've ever seen. And so that, that worked out really well. But then, even if it's not just about the leases, it's also just when people see the property partnering and being active with the community and other aspects of the community, it builds your community, and people just want to stay. People want to be a part of that. That's kind of more that was kind of a special thing. But again, we do a lot of open houses. We try to, we do celebrations. We'll do dinners. We'll do breakfast on the go. So maybe there's one property where I forget what day of the week, but like say every Thursday morning, our leasing assistant would be out there with little bags of, donuts and whatever. So people just leaving for work could just grab it and eat breakfast, and while they sat in Atlanta traffic, and stuff like that. We try to do a lot of those type of things. So
That's great. What would be an average budget for you for those activities?
yeah, I don't know if I can actually really answer that. I mean, I don't think any particular activity usually costs more than a couple $100, if that. Because candidly, a lot of times what we're doing is we ask our vendors to donate the supplies and the materials. So, we'll have a vendor donate the materials, and then our staff hands them out. And so really it costs our staff a little bit of time, but the actual financial cost is minimal. Or maybe we do an open house, or maybe we do another thing we'll do frequently at some properties is like a movie night for the, the kids. And so, we might buy $100 worth of pizza and $50 worth of, desserts and soda or something like that. And so it may $150 for that event, which, depends when you're at 100 or 150 or 200 unit property is fairly, is insignificant, especially for the return and goodwill that you're getting. So most of this stuff is at most a couple $100. In many cases, it's free.
Yeah, so leveraging your vendors is a good point. We've done pool parties when we brought people from AT&T showed up, and we had other vendors come in, and they had gift cards and they had gifts, and we did a back to school, so we had a hairdresser come in and did free haircuts for the kids. So that was really like you said, engaging the community, engaging the residents. That's always great ideas. So we have a little bit more time. I wanted to kind of transition over to value add. I know almost everything you do has a value add component part of it. Can you give us like 2-3 things that you guys like to do that increase income that is not just raising rents?
Yeah, there's a handful of things. One of them is washer dryers. I just saw a survey actually this past week that there's there's demand for amenities and there's supply of amenities, right? And it was the survey, it matched up the two. And basically what it was saying, well, what do people actually want, and then what is actually supplied? And like one of the ones was cat friendly apartments, right? Well, almost all apartments are cat friendly, but most residents actually don't care, right? So that was one where there was a mismatch. And on the flip side of that, the most in-demand amenity is in-unit washer dryers, yet only about 13% of apartments have that. So that's one of the things that we look for. Is there a way to supply that amenity? Whether it's, if we can buy a property that has the connections to begin with, that's fantastic. But if we don't, is there a way to add them? So we have one property that we purchased about a year ago that has the connections, but many renters can't afford to buy their own sets. So what we started doing is we started buying our own, and there's 2 ways to do this. You can sign up with a vendor and do a leasing program, or you can do what we're actually trying on this one, is we're just buying sets for like $650, And then it's an option. Say, hey, we have a laundry room you can use, but if you want for $40 a month, you know, we will put these in and you can rent them, right? Well, those washer dryer sets pay for themselves in like 15 months. And then it's just additional basically free income after that. And even if they break in 3 or 4 years, we've still made multiples of our money on that investment. So that's one, is washer dryer connections. The other one really is, it kind of gets overlooked, is just resident retention. So going back to what you're asking me about the open houses and the parties and the fun stuff, it's great for drawing people in, but it's also good for resident retention, because you know, a vacant unit, you know, you put somebody in that unit and they're paying you rent, but then that's also a unit that you don't have to turn, you don't have to repair, you don't have to do CapEx on. So the biggest thing really for income is to just reduce resident turnover. But again, you know, washer dryers, you can do preferred parking, you can do you know, different things with cable billing. You know, you buy it in bulk and then you sell it to the residents at a, you know, slightly higher amount. You know, water billing is a big one we've gone through on some properties, and just done individual metering and say, okay, you know, you pay what you use, pay for what you use. I mean, and it can be very property specific. We had one property that we were looking at, it was right on the freeway, and it was a great candidate for putting up a billboard. And doing, you know, for paid advertising. So, you know, some stuff's very generic and you can look at it almost any property. And then there's other stuff that some properties have unique opportunities based on their size and location in the market.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's take a look at the other side of that equation, reducing expenses.
Yeah, one of our favorite ones is water saving devices. You know, I'd say 5 years ago, we could plan on doing that at almost any property. Nowadays, it's already been done at a lot of properties, so it's not quite as a common thing as it used to be. But there's one property, we reduced the water bill by 60% just by going through and retrofitting all the toilets and the shower heads and just fixing all the leaks. So water saving is a big one. I already mentioned turnover. Generally, turnover is one. I mean, outside of property taxes and payroll. Yeah, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Turnover is really one of your biggest expenses, because number one, like I said before, it drops your income. But two, you've got a unit just sitting there vacant. Now you've got to, even best case scenario, you've got to paint it and clean it. But especially if you're in C-class properties, there's very, very rare that all you got to do is paint it and clean it.
Yes.
Right. Typically, there's some, you know, CapEx involved. I mean, especially on a harder C, a normal turn might be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. So that's a huge expense. And so not only is it the monetary expense, but if your maintenance team or your contractors are spending time turning those units, they're not spending time doing just the normal work orders and keeping the residents happy. And then or they're not addressing deferred maintenance, or they're not addressing routine maintenance, which becomes deferred maintenance. So turnover is a huge opportunity for keeping expenses down. Let's see. And then also, you know, one thing we do, if we're doing a renovation, we look at hardening the units, right? So if you put carpet in a property, especially again, you know, B- or C, that carpet, no matter how good it is, just doesn't last long, right? People they stain it, their dog chews it, that, you know, sometimes I still can't comprehend what some people do to these carpets, but it is the way it is. And so you end up replacing that all the time. So if instead of that carpet, you put in it's more expensive the first time, but an extremely durable, let's say like vinyl plank faux wood flooring, not only does it look nicer and you can often get more rent for it, it's much more durable. And if somebody damages it, you just pull up those couple of planks, put in new ones, and you're good to go. You don't have to replace the entire thing. Same thing with countertops. It's very tempting to spend $150 to resurface a countertop. Well, the minute someone puts a scalding hot pan on that countertop, it's ruined again, right? And now you've got to either resurface it, and it's just an ongoing thing. So we've actually, in some properties, started going with quartz, or with the quartz material, which is harder than granite, and it's almost indestructible. So that we know, we rent in that particular property, we plan to own it for 10 years. We're not going to have to touch those countertops for 10 years. We're not going to be resurfacing them. We're not going to be replacing them. They are done. So that's another thing we do is if we're going to hold the property for more than a few years, which we typically are, we try to harden the units to just reduce long-term ongoing maintenance expenses.
Thank you. This has been phenomenal so far, and I know you're running out of time. So just to wrap it up, a couple of quick questions. If you could go back in time to Andrew in 2007, before you got started in apartments, what's the best advice you would give yourself?
Well, I started the apartments in 2011.
Sorry.
And so if I went back to 2011, I'd probably say, hey, you know what? In 2019, you're going to invent time travel, and that's going to make you far richer than anything else. So don't worry about all this real estate business. No, what I would say is I would say, number one, try to go straight to the, especially back at that point in the cycle, try to just go straight to the B properties. Don't mess with the C stuff. It's funny, if you look, almost every operator, they start in C because the deals are easier to get, and then they move up to B and sometimes higher. So I would start in the B. Also, I would say, at those earlier points in the cycle, not only buy B properties, but in the beginning of the cycle, I can't tell you how many times where I've seen properties where in 2013 or 14, I didn't buy it because I didn't want to pay an additional $500 a unit. And now that would have meant absolutely nothing. There's one property in the Houston area where the seller wanted 24 a unit for it, and it was a B- property, good area. And I had it penciled out at 23.5 a unit, and we just ended up not getting a deal done. And I think 3 years later, I saw it come back on the market for 65 a unit. So how much did I lose because I just wasn't willing to pay market at the early part of a cycle? Now today, I think that $500 a unit could end up being a lot more important. But when you're early in the cycle, I wish I just aimed a little lower on the returns and bought more, and it would have worked out exceptionally well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Today was awesome. A lot of really good information for our listeners, Andrew. Do you want to take a couple of minutes to tell our listeners where they can find you if they have they want to reach out, they want to network, they want to invest in one of your deals?
Yeah, you can connect with me on Bigger Pockets, LinkedIn. If you actually want to reach out or really connect, our website is short for Vantage Point Acquisitions. It's vpacq.com. It's definitely not a fancy website. We're probably about at the point where it should be redone and updated, but there is a contact us form on there. And if you put in your information, that comes directly to my email inbox. And I tried to get back with those as quickly as possible. I do reply to all of them. Might not be within an hour, but I will get that and will reply. So that's generally the best way.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Andrew, today. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome, Joseph. Good talking with you.